Tourette's podcast is not a medical advice show. It's a show about experiences. In the course of that, we may talk about medications or therapies or stories from the doctor's office, but don't mistake any of that for medical advice or direction. It's not. Get that only from people or places licensed or certified to give it, not from a massively fun and action-packed podcast about our life experiences, such as...
Right at the beginning of choosing this as a career, that was something that went through my head. I didn't want it to define me, but I never wanted to not talk about it because it really did lead me to where I'm at today. It was because of Tourette's that I became so involved in singing and dancing and performing and fell in love with that, which in turn allowed me to, do what I love as a career.
This is Tourette's podcast, made possible with support of the Tourette Association of America and part of the Geeks Rising Network. Hey, it's Ben. Just want to say thank you for being so cool and understanding and checking in. You've noticed that this season has had a slightly different rhythm than those in the past. It's a weekly podcast by season, but we've skipped a few weekends here and there. I talked, I think, on the last episode about how, I've been sick and going from having some dawdling respiratory virus served on a bun of depression. And it's just been, the respiratory virus thing, I think, is in the past, but it's not COVID. I got checked a couple times, but there's this lingering depression that has just changed my schedule here and how I'm going about my days, but with perspective that I wouldn't have had without the conversations I've had with you and how you deal with it. And not only that, but keeping up with the Tourette scientists and neurologists and just people I've had conversations with, not even on the podcast, just, I have a lot of conversations with the Tourette community and the doctors and the researchers and, just trying to, do my homework the best I can, which is nothing without you guys being a compass for me. So I'm actually able to communicate helpful things and not just, suffer from the garbage in, garbage out way of communicating. I swear, I've said this on the podcast before, but looking at my, my diagnoses, major depressive disorder and generalized anxiety and, things that are more concerning and more immediate to me than, Tourette syndrome. So looking at it, kind of scientifically, what's happening in the brain when we feel this stuff, it really has helped me to isolate it. And, I'm still feeling it. When I'm depressed, it's the worst. Under a blanket, don't want to do anything. Notifications are coming in, emails are coming in, not wanting to check them because I don't want to, introduce any other expectations to myself, even though I need to. You got to stay on top of your work. But it's almost like, looking at the different kinds of carbon in the atmosphere. It's like, how can we tell what's coming from people? How can we tell what's coming from, natural sources? There are two different kinds of carbon. We can measure them distinctly and kind of know what's what. And so with me, it's like feeling sick in total. There's, the respiratory virus I had, and then this blurred line between do I still have this? Am I still sick or am I just depressed? Is that why I feel horrible and I'm just laying here? Then remembering, being depressed is also being sick. And even though it may be, dismissed as being, selfish or dramatic or lazy or, whatever people say when they observe somebody who just can't deal with it today and they're staying in bed and eating ice cream. And then criticizing yourself for staying in bed and eating ice cream and just it just goes deeper and deeper. Depression feeds itself so well. Anxiety feeds itself so well. And I know it's depression and not anxiety. I mean, with anxiety, there's like an edge to it. There's a bit of energy to it. I've just been sapped of energy. And as I'm talking right now, this is one of the first days where I'm really actually feeling okay. I did the old reliable exercise of, rearranging part of my house. I moved my bedroom into a different room in the house. And just for a change of, where I'm dwelling, like a physical change in where I'm dwelling, seems to have helped. There's some medication stuff being discussed. Anyway, this is all me and just saying, if this season has been a little bit arrhythmic, that's a factor. That's why. And not to make excuses, but just to say, sometimes we have to pull back and all the different parts of me, just need to maybe circle the wagons or put new tires on the vehicle or whatever analogies there are that, have to do with being knocked out and wanting to get back in. Now, I'd love to say with me, it's all just, working hard and identifying the problem and here's how I get better. I'm going to do it, for the community and everything. But it doesn't really happen without support and checking in and, not to be dramatic or anything like that, but just, it means a lot when I get an individual message from, somebody in the community. Sometimes I can't reply because, I'm feeling bad about that because there are definitely some emails I haven't replied to. I read everything that comes in, haven't replied to everything. Anyway, hearing from you, does the trick. And what music have you been listening to lately? Or, hey, here's a photograph I liked, or, just something like that. Just something to feel like I'm back with the program for a minute because I can discuss things. There's a sense of, I don't know, symbiosis when it comes to this stuff. Like we all play a role in each other's welfare. And, sounds like a cheesy, forgive me, frat boy version of a Bob Marley song. But yeah, getting through it. We're all getting through it. Our guest today on this episode, I think serves as a great example of trying to get where you need to be on your own terms. And in saying that, life is never completely on your own terms. I mean, we live in a world where, no matter what will we put into it, there are countervailing effects and forces out there. And, often it helps to recognize them so you know how to navigate. That's why a Tourette diagnosis is so important to so many people who are like, okay, finally, I have the answer. I know what to do with this now. There's a context now. What can I do within this context? And how can I set my own context for my own life that's separate from just a diagnosis? And so this is an episode that I think concentrates in a way on just doing it and not wondering anymore. If you have somewhere you want to be, something you can confirm to yourself that you're good at. But, if you're like me, you can flog a good idea into impossibility. Like you're sure this is something you can do good things with. This is the talent you have, whether it's visual arts or sports or distilling complicated ideas into relatable explanations, i.e. journalism, whatever it is. You have your talent. You can be sure of something you're good at. And then never do anything with it because you might tell yourself, whatever. This is stupid. I'm not pursuing this. I'm going to stick with the program instead. Play it safe because there are more guarantees there than me taking a risk of doing something different. And, I'm not leaving the Midwest to try my hand out in Los Angeles. No way. What if I fail? What if I try to make it big, but I'm humiliated? What if I lose all my money and burn holes in my safety nets in the process when I'm trying to, when I'm putting myself out there and taking risks and trying to be better? Those kinds of thoughts have created, some really stubborn risk aversion on my part. Self-consciousness or, something the Tourette community knows something about. So that feeling of what if, and in saying what if, I'm being a little bit on the nose here. With this setup I'm building for our guest, but let me tell you about her. She's a pop singer who has Tourette Syndrome and decided to just go for it. Moved out to LA. Her talents brought her the right audience. And now she's flying high. About to go tour England. Like she's doing it. And I'm sure many of you listening know who she is. Her name is Harper Starling. She's got a new single out called No More What If, with a music video that directly chronicles her move from the Midwest US out to Los Angeles and how success didn't, start at the corporate limits of the city. It's about work and hardship and varying levels of failure and all these things we worry about that, confront pretty much everyone who's at a level of maybe celebrity. You get it. Harper Starling was a joy to talk to. I think in part because when she talks, it doesn't sound like a bunch of detached, you can do it stuff. Like everybody can accomplish their wildest dreams no matter what it is if they just try and put their mind to it. Like this isn't stuff like that. Harper's real. She gets it. I think because she knows what it's like to have something, to live with something that can be misunderstood, but also, seems to play a role in the development of talent. Tourette Syndrome, as Harper tells it, directly fueled what she's been able to do and how she's gone about it. We talk about introversion. We talk about being in the zone with your craft, about contemplation, about taking that risk. So right now on Tourette's podcast, here's singer, songwriter, performer, Harper Starling. For your tour, so you're getting ready to take off, right? So to the UK for tour. What's the tour going to be all about? How long are you out? Who are you with? Where are you headed? Could you tell us about that?
I am opening for A1. They are a very, very well-known band in the UK. And I'm very excited to be going with my manager, Cindy Valentine. We'll be leaving actually this Saturday, and I'll be gone for 3 weeks. I've never been to the UK.
3 weeks.
I'm very excited. Yeah. It will be all in England right now, but I definitely want to be visiting. I wish I could stay longer to go visit everywhere. That would be great.
Well, so I was reading your bio, and there are definitely some cool notes in there about, linking up with Sigmund from Violent Femmes and opening for Sheryl Crow. And so just thinking about this with you going on tour, when the podcast started a few years ago, music is my background too. And one of the questions I always wanted, to ask musicians or singers or people who perform for an audience in some way, when Tourette syndrome is somewhere in the picture is, what do you do about the nerves and things that can maybe set off your tics? But I know perfectly well from my own experience and from others I've talked to is, when you're in the zone, depending on who you are, your tics might not really be much of an issue. They can kind of go away when you're, on stage, pressure's on. It seems like you would think about tics and nervousness and things like that. Perfect place for the tics to come out and play. But, it might not be much of an issue. Do you find that that's the case for you where you can kind of hyper focus on the music and performance? And
I do actually. Yeah. When I am on stage and performing, somehow being hyper focused tends to make them disappear. I have no idea how the science behind that works, but that does happen for me. Right before I go on stage, though, for some reason, the tics are kind of at an all-time high.
Yeah.
And then it suddenly, whoosh, they just kind of go away. Yeah. I have no idea why that is. That's been the case my entire life. Whether it's singing or dancing, anything with performing, for some reason, right before I have to do that, that's what happens. And then the minute it starts going on, I feel like maybe the two are like, you know what, we're gonna take a backseat to all of this.
You're in your own place, and the tics aren't allowed to come along. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's like this safe. I guess the best way to describe it is kind of a safe zone or a safe bubble that it like can't get through. But I do notice, when you said it exactly perfectly well, when it's negativity or stress or sometimes being super tired, I feel like all those kind of bring them on. And if you try to suppress it, it almost makes it like backtracks on you instead of just letting them, and that's why when I'm performing and they go away, that became my life. Singing and dancing. Once we kind of figured out that was what made them disappear. So honestly, I'm at where I'm at today because of Tourette's.
So how far back does this go? I mean, in terms of what you would call a career or just the starting point where, like singing and dancing or whatever is going to occupy a good chunk of my time. This is what I'm good at, what I'm interested in. Were you performing as a kid too?
If you count the Disney, sing-along songs and all those lovely things that you do as kids, but
that counts.
As a career, and I've perfect, and then we could say that always have been involved with the arts and singing and dancing and performing, but as a career, honestly, the defining factor for me was when Lady Gaga came to perform in Milwaukee. And I remember being with my sister and I told her, like, all right, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this as a career. And a couple of months later, packed up and moved out here.
The bug hit you moved. I mean, so was this full on propulsion of excitement or, were you nervous? And I'm just asking that because there's the part of, say, like with me, I get nervous about making big transitions because I worry about failure and I worry about, the anxiety and depression, all those pieces come into play. And then also wondering, like, how is my Tourette going to be regarded in this specific situation? If I'm starting a new job or something like that, it's, there are things I become very self-conscious of. Did you have that along with the excitement of being like, okay, this is exactly what I know I'm going to be doing. I'm going to make this move.
I did. for sure. I'm I'm an introvert by nature, and I didn't know anybody moving out here. I had no family, no friends. Everyone was back in Wisconsin, and that was very nerve-wracking for me. It's something I've wanted to do for years, but when I finally decided this is what I'm going to do and this is what needs to happen, I need to move. East or West Coast, didn't know. I do like warm weather. That was a that was a big factor moving to the West. But it is something that's always in the back of my mind for my Tourette's, just because how, my Tourette's come about are I have a lot of facial tics. And sometimes, if people aren't aware of that and they ask, oh, is something wrong? And I go, it's okay. It's just my Tourette's, and sometimes I think they're I don't know, embarrassed that they asked. And I said, it's okay. Like I am very comfortable with it now, but it was definitely something that it took a while for me to be comfortable with talking about it.
So were you, just thinking about, being diagnosed as a kid and, the one thing about, Tourette being kind of, for the most part regarded as a childhood onset disorder where, the tics start to come up at an age that's it's kind of immediately preceding when you're kind of headed toward the young adult teenage years. And, I was diagnosed when I was like 6, but it's still a very sensitive age when you're forming your identity and you're trying to make friends and not be a quote unquote weirdo or whatever it is. And were you openly accepting of your Tourette diagnosis, or was this something you were kind of, stuffing to the back so you could deal with things your own way, or where were you on that?
I feel like I fell in between the two. So the tics came on when I was 8. And now looking at it, that is when the Tourette started. But really, I wasn't actually, like, we didn't know that that's what it was until I was in high school. I just remember having a lot of tests done when I was 8, 9, 10, and I understand like that kids don't, they don't understand really what's going on. It looks different. It sometimes sounds different if people have those types of tics. And I think just because I wasn't aware of what was happening to me, it was a little nerve-wracking. I mean, I was scared. I was scared as a kid, and there wasn't really anything I could do about the tics, but while I felt different, I didn't hold like any resentment towards them. I wasn't angry.
Yeah.
But I did always wonder maybe why, like, I just wanted to know what was happening, really is the biggest thing.
I mean, do you remember, this may be hard to answer because I don't know specifically when I did, but becoming conscious of what Tourette syndrome was in terms of popular perception versus what you knew to be true within yourself. There's I'm being diagnosed with this thing. Everybody else thinks it's something else. That, definitely figured into my decision to not be very public about it and talk about it because I was ashamed and all that. But do you remember maybe some of your early memories of like how I have Tourette syndrome, or, did it come as a shock, even though tics were part of your life by that point, or how'd you feel getting the diagnosis?
Honestly, once I finally was diagnosed, I was relieved because I had an answer to what it was, because I went to my mom and dad took me to a neurologist as opposed to, the other doctors who just couldn't, that wasn't their specialty. So we're trying all these different tests, and it was very, I guess that's the one word I can give it, is I was relieved to know that this is what this is. But my earliest memories of Tourette's was, I remember I had this thing where I would like kind of throw my head back and my whole body would kind of, do a backward bend type of thing, which is probably why I was always so good at gymnastics. But I remember needing to do that sometimes, and I would have to like get up out of my desk to, be able to do that with my body. And I guess that's my earliest memory of it, but I didn't but being that I remember when I was diagnosed with it, that is clear in my head.
And the reason I ask that too is, especially if you have maybe something in mind that you're good at, you want to take somewhere, i.e. singing, performing. I've heard some people say that, when they got the diagnosis or when it was confirmed to them, they did have some early thoughts of like, well, I guess that's it. I'm not going to be able to follow my dream because nobody's going to take me seriously. They're going to see me as the Tourette's person instead of, I'll be the singer with Tourette's versus the singer, and you kind of, you can psych yourself out. And, it's just, did you go through any of that? Maybe trying to square the reality of your situation and trying to stay realistic about it, but also staying, motivated to get to somewhere.
Yeah, actually, I'm really glad you brought that up. Right at the beginning of choosing this as a career, that was something that went through my head. I didn't want it to define me.
Yeah.
But I never wanted to not talk about it because it really did lead me to where I'm at today. It was because of Tourette's that I became so involved in singing and dancing and performing and fell in love with that, which in turn allowed me to, do what I love as a career. So I can't, I would never not want to talk about it. And I guess I fall somewhere in between that. I hope I'm answering the question correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the revelation, I do remember the revelation with arts in general with me. And I come from, I guess, that kind of family. My mom was like a music teacher and a dance teacher. And my dad was more of a science guy, but he was still creative. And, that was there in the family. But I do remember early on, I going to like a psychiatrist and, we would just do exercises. This is when I'm a little kid, I'm like 7 or 8 years old and I'm just drawing pictures and they're not very good. But I remember one day it was like a switch flipped. I remember it with photography. I remember it with music. I remember it with drawing and painting where it's like, I'm terrible at it. Then all of a sudden I feel like I'm good at it. And it was almost like an overnight type thing. And that kind of figured into my level of comfort with my introversion and the tics that I had. And I did spend a lot of time when I was a kid, trying to perfect things and really enjoying it and not necessarily lamenting that I wasn't outside all the time playing. I was inside, kind of honing my skills and all that. That was an important part for me. It's, I felt like the sense of break that I had and the sense of confidence that I had from realizing there's like, oh, there is something I might kind of be good at. Maybe nobody else thinks it yet, but there's something I see here. And, it was a really powerful feeling to get to that point and have that feeling alone when you have something like, Tourette that may make you doubt yourself and which may also come with other things, anxiety, depression, things like that. But did you ever have a moment like that where, you talked about once you kind of got into the space of singing and dancing and everything, and then realizing this is a place where your tics take a break. I mean, did you get that feeling of confidence and did that kind of help you proceed to the next steps of wanting to do something with it? Because it's such a profound thing, I think, to have that feeling.
It did. When I was at school with the tics, I think sometimes I felt very much an outcast during that. And when, it did improve over time. But at the beginning, when it first came on, I noticed, kids were treating me differently. But when I would be in, dance classes and music, etc., I felt like I belonged. I felt it did spark confidence in me because people paid attention, people listened. And, as a kid, you want your own voice. And that was a very beautiful thing to have for a little girl, is this confidence that I felt that I was lacking in other areas. And I guess maybe that's why I decided to keep going at it and keep honing my craft. And I always told my parents, I was like, anything and everything that had to do with dance and music, I was like, and singing, I'm like, please let me be part of this.
Yeah.
So that's really, yeah, that would be my angle to all of that.
So were you supplementing with, medication, or did you have other ways of managing it? Or was this just sort of, what were the arts your way of kind of dealing with it?
It was twofold. My parents did not want me taking any medication for it at the time, but we did notice the more holistic my diet was, actually, like the less preservatives, et cetera, et cetera. I found nitrites are some of the worst things that I can have that cause my tics to go off, which is always healthy. It's good processed food. That's always a bonus. So that was definitely something that we started incorporating into just everyday diet. So it's very active as a kid, which is great. And that, again, being involved in multiple activities, just anytime, as long as I wasn't sitting still, the moment I started to sit still and be calm was when the tics would go off.
Yeah. Yeah. When you were a kid, did you have to come up with ways to explain it to other people? I mean, was this something that people observed about you and asked?
They did. Of course, when I'm really, really little, I didn't know that what it was that I had. I would just be like, all I would say is I can't help it.
Yeah.
If they would say to stop, because I didn't know. As I got older and people would ask, "Oh, are you okay?" And they would see or, hear some of the tics. And I said, "It's okay. It's my Tourette. They're involuntary tics. It's all good. I'm good." And they were like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know." And I'm like, I'm all good. I'm okay. I always, like, because, when you become accepting of it,
yeah,
and make it part of the norm to talk about, I think then other people aren't as afraid to talk about it. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe that's, because I do know of a few other people here in LA that also have Tourette's, and I know that they prefer not to talk about it at all or put it by the wayside, which, of course, like, everyone's entitled to do what they want to. No, they can or can't talk about it. It's their life. But I said, it's always going to be a part of you, and instead of trying to, like, just push it away and pretend like it doesn't exist, I mean, basically, you just got to embrace it.
Yeah,
it is. It's a part of you.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing I noticed about, I think myself, was in retrospect, the amount of effort and energy and just how draining it can be to be guarded all the time. And, maybe try to keep people from noticing things about yourself so they don't ask. And so they don't think you're anything other than, quote unquote, normal or whatever. I mean, it's just that these are things everybody goes through, of course, when it comes to acceptance and peer pressure and whatever else it is. But yeah, what you said about the way you talk about it can frame how other people interact with you on that subject and your level of comfort with it and what they read from it. I mean, it's so important. And that's one thing I didn't have much of a realization on until maybe even doing this podcast or starting the podcast. I think it was maybe season 2. And there was a guest named Jaleesa, and she said something similar to that, is that, the way you kind of carry yourself and the way you treat yourself, other people are going to treat you similarly. They're going to think that's the standard and that's your comfort level and that's what you set for yourself. And people usually can follow suit, in general. I mean, some people are jerks, some people are overly nice, but in general, it's like people will take their cues, they'll take their cues from you. And that's been such an important thing to remember that I don't always remember, is because I can be very self-deprecating and I can be very, kind of down on myself sometimes. And, depression and all that stuff plays a role in that. But remembering that when it comes to, if there is a goal in the moment of wanting some sort of, accepting treatment or equal treatment, or this whole thing being a non-issue, it is going to come down to a degree on how I describe it to people and how I describe my life with it. And I want to be honest. I don't want to, put on some sort of, celebration for myself and my Tourette syndrome, but, it does help people to, I think, calibrate where you are with it. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's really important to remember, is just how you frame it for other people is definitely how they're going to follow suit and how they talk to you. And
Exactly.
and especially when they see you owning, you're owning your skills and you're going for it, and you're not letting this, you can think of this in like so many other ways too, of other things that people deal with, but it's not, they're still owning whatever their talent is, and they're nailing it. And that becomes the thing that they're more known for, versus like the guy who's weird because he's always covering up his insecurity or whatever it is.
Exactly. And it's all about confidence and owning it, and just how it's being projected and perceived to other people.
The Tourette Association of America is the premier nonprofit working to raise awareness, advance research, and provide ongoing support to those with Tourette Syndrome or tic disorder. With a network of over 130 chapters, support groups, and centers of excellence, the TAA engages with communities across the nation in an effort to provide tools, webinars, workshops, and support for all seeking assistance. As a primary sponsor of Tourette's podcast, the TAA supports the authentic conversations showcasing the diverse representation of the TS community. To learn more, visit Tourette.org, TOURETTE.org.
Have you interacted with other people from the Tourette community, or maybe in the course of talking with other singers? I mean, like, we definitely know there's a Tourette presence in popular music and popular arts, and it's not as
there is. I was very surprised. I didn't know Billie Eilish has Tourette's.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a few other singers I've met out here, 3 in particular, that also have Tourette's. And it's interesting because, again, I'm from back in Milwaukee, also it's just not, there aren't as many people as there are in LA. I get that. But it was nice, I guess, just to meet other people that, we all have different situations and experiences growing up, but we all have these tics, and it's just good to find people that are like me, I guess, and found a way with music that was their outlet that they had chosen. And so it's a beautiful thing to see.
Early on when we were talking, you can attribute a lot of this to Tourette syndrome and your sort of cause for action, I guess, so to speak, and why you're here doing what you're doing. With the different walks of life we have, we hear it again and again. I mean, there are certain artists, we talked with Adam Curry, who invented podcasting at the beginning of last season. And, he directly attributes Tourette syndrome and the way to the way he thinks and to the way he kind of, envisions things and maps things out, and maybe what his proclivities are. And it all kind of goes back to how he's wired. And that led him to certain things and realizations of, wow, me framing my thoughts this way in the context of Tourette syndrome has led me to other things that I can do and the way I think, and I can definitely link these things together. And like that in and of itself can be a confidence, I feel like. And
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Like, even if it's just for yourself, it's cool when you're talking about meeting other people and different walks of life, but music is kind of how they're coping and dealing. And that's such a thing, I think, in the Tourette community. Music especially, the arts overall, but music especially. I mean, has Tourette as subject matter worked its way into your music?
It has not. I would not be opposed to incorporating it at all. I'm always down for new ideas, new things. That's the beauty of my co-writer and manager, Cindy Valentine. We really have great synergy with each other when we're writing. And I feel very open and comfortable to always bring up, what's on my mind. And she's so good. She is so good. So good with the melodies and the concepts that she comes up with.
Yeah.
And I know this would be something down the line that we could always bring up in future music.
I had to look up I remember Cindy's name, and I was interacting with her, and in the course of setting up this conversation, and I was like, I know her name somehow. And I looked it up. I'm like, okay, I definitely recognize her. Where's she from? This led me to Teen Witch and her credits on that. And back in the day, that's something I'm 41. So that's something I kind of grew up with, was like that time period. And that was really cool. I mean, being able to link with other people who can, kind of help you along your career. Was that something she was particularly interested in? Your sort of neurology, so to speak, or?
Yeah, it was just, it wasn't a deciding factor at all. What she looked at for sure was, who I am as an artist and as a person. And the Tourette's wasn't a factor in that at all. But of course, like as a human being, she was like, oh, okay. It's always good to know about that. It's good to talk about that and bring awareness about it, but it's not like she signed me because of my Tourette's.
Yeah, for sure. And which is great, great. I think there's kind of a double reward with that because, with or without Tourette syndrome, if you have your talent, you have your talent. But it's also really good to, you have your story and how it impacts your life and your perspective on things and what you want to say. I mean, what you want to be affiliated with when it comes to the messaging in your music and all of that. It's another thing that people can connect with. I think even if people don't have it, just kind of recognizing something that you might be open about in terms of a vulnerability. And that in and of itself can be really, really powerful when it comes to just connecting with people. I mean, there are people who have diagnoses that I don't have, but I connect with them because I respect their vulnerability with it. And that just seems to be another level of kind of why music exists and connecting with people and trying to work things out. And I don't know.
Exactly. I feel like that's when music is at its strongest, is exactly what you said. When people are being vulnerable, when they're being honest, it's something beautiful that we don't always see in, I guess, day-to-day life. And when we get to hear and see someone else be kind of, that's have that type of strength, because being vulnerable is actually a very, very strong thing to do. And a lot of people, when we see someone being vulnerable, that's when we connect the most. Like that's what makes music so beautiful. And that's those are the songs that are timeless, that everybody from every walk of life can connect to. So
what's even, the sincerity piece too of vulnerability, because sometimes, you can kind of hear these songs that the subject matter is a little bit too blue collar for the reality of the person singing it. And maybe they do come from like a background of that, but like, when there's sometimes I think there's a relatability urgency with certain musicians or writers, or just to connect with the audience in a way that comes off a little bit too on the nose, colloquial, and in a way where it's not quite believable. It's a little bit generic and washed. And even if you don't go straight up announcing, in a song like, hey, this is my Tourette syndrome song, it's, there's still this believability in everything else you say because of the experiences that you end up gathering, because of the challenges that you've had. And it's just like, that's my favorite kind of relatability, when it feels completely sincere and authentic and isn't just, for the sake of relating to an audience. It's actually something that you've lived in. There's no way of escaping putting some degree of this stuff into your music or your performance, or, that's where it feels real. And
exactly.
Yeah. And it's like, you don't even have to write a straight up Tourette syndrome song for that to convey, I feel like.
Well, two songs recently, one that was just released, and one that's about to be released, are very, what's the word for it? Like, they're documentaries of my life and Cindy's life too. Not the second one, but the first one. The first one, the one that's out, No More What If.
Yeah, definitely.
It's very. So I was very blessed to write that with Cindy, and also with Nico the Kid. And Cindy and we've worked on projects before this, and we both talked about, she originally came from Canada and moved to LA to pursue her career. And I was from Milwaukee and came to LA. And over time, as you know, as we work together, different things that we say or thoughts or whatever, I know she writes down. And I wish I remember the day, but for some reason, I remember the time. It was 3 a.m. in the morning, and she came up with this idea. And I remember the next week, she's like, I got this at 3 a.m. And she played it for me. And I was like, this is so beautiful. Like, this captures everything that I've wanted to say. And it also is very much a part of her life too. And then, you know, and we the rest of the pieces kind of fell into place. And the whole point of the song documents my move from Milwaukee to LA. The first lines go, small town bubble, Midwest girl. And then the second verse goes to, look at me now, West Coast girl. It's all about taking chances, like no more what ifs. And the video was very reminiscent. You know, I had a pickup truck. There's a resume with like professional cheese eater, all these different things that like that's showing like that's my life. And I'm so grateful and thankful for Cindy and for Nico, the kid as well, for how everything came together for that song. And then when you said being vulnerable for the second song, oh my, this was even more. So this happened to me a while back. And you know how sometimes some people might have one of those, what was I thinking, moments or flings or what have you at a bar, and it happens.
Yep.
So that happened. And a lot of other following details. I won't give it away yet because I mentioned it in the song, and the song is going to come out actually October 29th. That's called Cannot Tell a Lie. Heard it here first. Woo-hoo. But I told Cindy about it, and Cindy's like, oh, we're writing that in a song. That's a song. I go, no, we're not. She goes, oh, yes, we are. And that came about. Oh, man. I'm so excited. But it is, as you said, you have to take experiences from your own life if you're able to connect to your music and hope that other people connect to it as well and be vulnerable. And boy, is that ever me being vulnerable about that. Woo!
Well, I mean, I love it because that extra edge of vulnerability is, you know, it helps things stand out and helps people to, you know, it's just something feels different about it. And maybe they're not sure about it because they're nervous too. And it just with themes that people align themselves with. And with that, when you were talking about with No More What If and the whole concept of, you know, moving to a brand new place, you know, where it's a lot of fish in the pond and, you know, what do I do? Is this going to work out for me? And having to come to grips with maybe that feeling of what if it doesn't work out? Like, what if this is failure? What if I come back penniless, or, you know, I have to come back in shame? All these like bridges you got to cross of thinking to be able to do something that big, unless you just do it. And I'm not that kind of person. I can be very risk averse, and being risk averse can be useful until you start, you know, disenfranchising yourself from opportunities. And that's something that it can be a very, very nervous situation when you're nervous anyway where you are. And then having to make this big, you know, whether it's moving out to LA or it's really opening up in a song and saying something that like, God, should I be doing this? Should I be saying this? And there's just something about that with songs like that and documenting, it's just, you take everybody along step by step. And it's just, that's the kind of stuff that's really important for people in this community to see. You know, even the song's not about Tourette syndrome, but if people know kind of where you're coming from and people in this community can hear this sort of thing, it's something I need to hear more of, just not being so reserved and guarded all the time because I'm so worried about the outcome. And
exactly.
What would you say to people who are maybe in the position of, you know, like they can confirm their talents to themselves, but when it comes to taking it to the quote unquote outside world, or a place where they might be judged or maybe turned down or something like that. I mean, it's, I'm sure you've dealt with situations where it wasn't, it hasn't just been like victory after victory. You have to contend with things and maybe struggle with losses, and so didn't like it after all. And does this mean everything I do is bad? Or, just these mind games you can play with yourself. What would you say to somebody who's maybe on the fence and does want to pursue something, but is worried about that sense of risk and failure and vulnerability?
Hopefully this isn't a long-worded answer, but it was, I know, like, not everyone's going to like what you do. There's no way to please everyone. Keep working at your craft, keep working at what it is you love. And if you're happy and proud of it when you put it out, that's what matters. It is representation of you. You've got to keep working at your craft every single day. Every single day. I know, I completely understand what it's like to be afraid to put it out and be afraid of failure. It is it's human in us to worry about that. But, you got to be able to take the risk and take the chance, because you never know. It might just stick and land, which I'm so grateful and blessed that it has. So.
Has your introversion helped you in this regard at all? And what I mean is, with me, the time I spend being introverted, being by myself, that's when I'm working on things and trying to improve things and get better at things and read and all that. I mean, do you find that to be true for yourself?
I think so. I like to sit back and observe a lot when I'm in big crowds. Mm-hmm. I notice, I like to be more of the wallflower. You can always find me by the food and drink table. That's the Midwest in me still. But I like to observe. I like to watch and learn in that sense. But where I do my best work, I do notice tends to be when I'm by myself and practicing in that sense. That is my go-to.
Yeah. And I bring that up. I've talked about on the podcast a few times before, but I think sometimes, like, parentally, there can be worry about, your kid spending too much time by himself or herself. And I don't think it's always a bad thing. Like, a problem is a problem. But with me, I think when there maybe might've been some worry that I was isolating myself too much, I think I knew what I was doing, and I think I came out better. And you have to take those risks and challenges and cross bridges and do new things and meet new people and all that. But there's some importance to having
that time to yourself as well. Again, everything's got pros and cons. I understand, being solo and interacting with others is always very important, but it's sometimes that time alone where the best thoughts kind of come out, I guess. Yeah. So that's what I've noticed.
Yeah. Anyway. It's like when you hear, I'll just say everyday people, when they say my best ideas come to me when I'm in the shower or something like that. It's, right? it's kind of the same concept. I mean, I assume that's, the private time of most people, but yeah, same thing. And just like when you were talking about Cindy coming up with this idea at 3 a.m, I mean, it's just like when you're alone with your thoughts, that's when it happens for me too. 3 a.m. is a pretty magic hour for me. And
yeah, right.
Coming up with new ideas. And
when she told me that, oh my gosh, that woman, she works so hard. She never sleeps. I was like, this is just great. I wish these ideas came to me at 3 a.m. in the morning. Oh my gosh. Yeah, she's so grateful to have her in my life.
That's that's a different kind of person where you're just kind of like, I feel like I'm busy all the time. How do you do it? Like, this is nuts. Right? And yeah.
Oh, she's wonderful.
So do you think singing is, or performing is that your long-term track, or is there something you want to do in addition to that? Or maybe, are you going to school for something else, or where do you think all this is taking you?
Definitely, singing is definitely my number one, where I am most focused right now. I would love to do some acting as well. I would love to do acting. I love to dance. I always joke dance was my first love. Singing is my true love. Mm-hmm. Really just being involved in the arts. That's living, breathing it. That's what it's about. That's what I uprooted my whole life for. So that's what I see in the future.
Well, that puts you in the position to, kind of help pull other people through who might need, a Cindy or, just someone to kind of help you realize your talents and get you where you need to be. And you could be that person for somebody else, which is amazing.
Yes, absolutely. I got so lucky when she came into my life. And it was during quarantine too, which is crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It was something good.
Yeah, something had to come out of 2020 that was good, right?
Right? It had to. It was her. Yeah, I'm very happy for it.
Well, is there anything I haven't asked about that you think is important, something that you want people to know? Or
I would love to talk about very quickly the No More What If music video and then the upcoming single as well. For
Please.
Cannot Tell a Lie. I did mention a bit about the story of that, but No More What If, the music video was very, very lucky. Cindy, of course, came up with the concept. And as she's mentioning the little things here and there, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, we need a pickup truck. We need this. You're right. Wow, this is cool. And then we found Devin Dillmore, who was the videographer, and everything worked. We were all in synergy together for that. I was very thankful and lucky to have both Cindy be a cameo in that, as well as Lisa London, who has been in Hot. She's been in numerous things. So thankful to have both of those beautiful ladies. I also got to shoot at For the Stars Fashion House, which is actually one of the outfits I was wearing in the video is from them. And I'm excited to announce I'll be performing for their fashion show this Thursday at the Peterson Automotive Museum.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm very excited for that. And and then we shot, we shot all over for that one. That was just great. Everyone that was involved in that, I was super happy and thankful for. And then for Cannot Tell a Lie, we actually just shot that video a week ago. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh man, it was great. We worked with Industrialism Films, which was great. Cindy was one of the directors as well for that. We got Johnny Roast Beef to be one of the stars in there. I was so thankful to Cindy for bringing him in, and to Johnny. If he hears this, thank you. He was hilarious. He's been in Goodfellas. He's been in The Mask. Oh my gosh, his resume goes on.
That's amazing.
And we had a couple of influencers in there too. We had Hootie Hurley. We had Gabby Marie. We had Jack Bloom. We had Brittany from The Bachelorette. I was like, it was just a really wonderful day. I was so happy with how it all went, how it turned out. And the video will be coming out on October 29th, as will the single. So very excited about that.
Where can people find this? I'm going to link to everything in the show notes with this episode at tourettespodcast.com. But for people who just want to, for the enterprising folks, where can they find you?
www.harperstarling.com has all the info, but for socials, if they want that, it's very easy. It's at Harper Starling.
Easy enough. At Harper Starling.
Very easy. Yep.
Well, Harper, thank you so much. I mean, this has been a lot of fun to talk and
thank you so much for having me. Oh, I was so looking forward to this.
Yeah. This is going to be cool, and I'm excited for everybody to hear it. And this is, I just want to say best of luck to you. But I mean, the level of commitment that you have is pretty obvious. So it's a little bit less about luck and more about just kind of where you are and what you're able to do with it. And this is, this has been a pleasure talking.
Thank you so much again, Ben. Have a great day.
Thanks so much for listening. Thanks to Harper Starling for coming on and prioritizing a discussion with the Tourette community. We didn't script this out. This wasn't a paid spot or anything like that. We're just talking. Again, if you're in the UK and you want to catch some of her dates and see her live, you can do that. harperstarling.com. That's HARPERSTARLING. And I'll link to all of this in the show notes with this episode at tourettespodcast.com. Special thanks to the aforementioned Cindy Valentine for helping to coordinate this. And thanks to you guys for listening. Tourette's Podcast is made possible by the Tourette Association of America, online at tourette.org. So you might already have this on your calendar, but October 28th is the Tourette Gala, the 2021 Gala, which will be virtual. So again, Thursday, October 28th, the Tourette Gala. If you go to tourette.org, that's TOURETTE.org right now, you'll see the button for the virtual gala. It says here, this evening of celebration will raise critically needed funds that advance the mission of making life better for everyone impacted by Tourette Syndrome and tic disorders. Remember, it's not just Tourette Syndrome. There are other kinds of tic disorders out there. This is all one big thing in terms of advocacy. So go to tourette.org, click the gala button, and you'll see where you can get tickets. Again, this is a fundraiser. And it says here, experience our affordable event in a fun, interactive, and accessible format. In addition to the program, attendees will have the opportunity to participate in an online auction. You'll get to see the 2021 Gala honorees, including Tim Howard, analyst for NBC Sports Premier League coverage, and of course known for his accolades worldwide in playing, what we call soccer in the US and what they call football everywhere else. Thank you, Tourette Association of America, tourette.org. Thanks also to Geeks Rising, such a great podcast family. Geeksrising.com is where you can find all the past episodes of this podcast, as well as others about communication and technology and social media, and the power of connections, and what's happening in pop culture, technology. Tourette's Podcast and others are at geeksrising.com. And last but never least, thanks to Sophia in the UK. She's our admin for the Tourette's Podcast discussion group and does an amazing job. The discussion group has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of members, and you can join up with them, talk about the podcast or anything else Tourette or neurodiversity or whatever else is on your mind. That's the Tourette's Podcast discussion group on Facebook. All right, folks, we got one more episode this season, and it's going to be really good. Really pumped on our guest, who's going to kind of tie a lot of things together. You can reach me in the meantime, tourettespodcast@gmail.com, or you can go to tourettespodcast.com and use the contact form. We're also on Instagram, Twitter. And if you want to give individual support to the podcast, the cup of coffee type thing, you can go to patreon.com/tourettespodcast. All right, thanks everybody. We'll talk to you in the finale. This is Ben.